And welcome everybody. So, page 25, paragraph 3. If you are seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed in the region from which there is no return for human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. You know, we have two alternatives. We can keep doing what we're doing, until the bitter end, or accept spiritual help. What is your choice going to be? Now we go into the best part that of the book that I really enjoy, and we're going to talk about a certain American businessman who had ability, good sense, and high character. This person's name was Roland Hazard, not the first, not the second, but Roland Hazard the third. So I'm going to put a couple of things up on the screen. So bear with me one second, because as I say, my computer is not the quickest. And so the shares sometimes take a little bit of time to get up. So bear with me. There we go. It should come up momentarily. Okay. Now, you have probably heard the story that Bill Wilson always talks. It's in Bill Wilson, My First 40 Years, and it's in a few other books that people have talked about. And that Roland went and saw Dr. Young and spent a year with Dr. Young. He did not. There was an article that was printed in 2006, 2007, updated in 2008, and it's called Stellar Fire by Cora Finch. And here's a couple of things that we'll go through. Can everybody give me a thumbs up if they can see it? Okay. Screen share is working. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So here we go. In 1926, Caroline wrote to Leonard with renewed optimism. Roland, referred to in family letters as Roy, was amazingly improved, and Caroline attributed much of the credit to an analysis recommended by Leonard. Now, Leonard Bacon was a cousin, I believe, of Roland, and they had gone to see Carl Jung for treatment earlier, and they recommended Carl Jung to Roland. And Roland had seen many therapists, lay therapists, and all different types of trying to get help, and which he will do in future years after 26 also. By 17th of April 1926, Roland and Helen were on a steamer bound for Europe. After short stops in London, Paris, and Brussels, they arrived in Zurich May 6. Okay? A letter from Roland to Leonard, dated only May 15th, is written on the stationery of the Dolder Grand Hotel of Zurich. Details in that letter match closely those of a letter from Young to Leonard, dated May 16, 1926. Hazard and his wife are here. Both letters indicate that Roland had begun work with Young, and Helen, his wife, with Young's assistant, Tony Wolfe. Now, the reason I put these dates in here are to show that he didn't spend a year with Carl Young. Okay? Young and Helen, with Young's assistant, Tony Wolfe, on on 24th of June, 1926, Roland's bank account showed an expense of $5,002.50 to cover charge put through by FL&T Co. A sum cabled to Roland Hazard on his request. It is itemized to travel. The equivalent in today's dollars would be more than $50,000. Some of the money would have been needed for hotel expenses and meals, but even the Hazards could not have spent very much of it on travel. Most of the money was presumably needed to cover Young's fees. The New York Times social notes column of 24th of July, 1926, included a mention that Mr. and Mrs. Roland Hazard of Peacedale, Rhode Island, are at the Ritz-Carlton by 2nd of August, Roland was back in Peacedale. Okay, so we have the dates. We know that they on April 17th they left by steamer. Okay, we know that they had arrived in Zurich on May 6th. So if we take all these dates, it leaves a total of 87 days. Okay, at the most, at the most. And really, when we think about it, it took them about 19 days to travel. So out of this 87 days, take approximately 15 days off for travel. So they spent approximately 2 months seeing Young. Okay, it just goes to show that, what Bill Wilson told, was what he had heard from Ebby. I don't know of any proof that Roland ever met Bill Wilson. I have never seen any writing anywhere that they ever met. Now, they traveled in the same circles, though, and the Calvary Church, and with the Oxford group. So could they have met? Yeah, it is quite possible. But I have seen no written documentation that they ever had met. So all the information that Bill had, he would have heard from Ebby. And we do know that from writing the big book, a lot of the stories that Bill told were not always dated correctly. You know, they always had a purpose to keep everybody sober, but not all of his information was correct. And I just put this other part in because I thought it was interesting. The issue of Carl Jung's significance to AA is inseparable from the contribution of the Oxford Group movement. When Roland told his story to the Oxford Group associates, he was offering evidence that objective medical opinions supported conversion as the only hope for the hopeless alcoholic. The context was an important part of the message. Now, I'll put this into the chat later on, so if anybody wants it. Also, if you are interested in the article that is available online, the whole thing of Stellar Fire by Cora Finch. So just if you're interested in it, you know. Now here's a few pictures of our rollicking Roland Hazard. At different ages, and very wealthy young man, uh, good businessman. Uh, you know, he had life by the tail. The only problem was he was an alcoholic, and that was one thing that he couldn't shake. So I'm just going to take the screen share down, and let's go back to the book. So we're at the top of page 26. I hope you find it interesting, some of these pictures and some of the information. If you, it won't keep you sober. Look at the 12 steps. We have to go through them. But I find history, to me, is exciting. It's opened up a whole new avenue for me. It's enabled me to get deeper into the book, understand what these people look like, brings these people to life for me. Okay, so let's go back to it. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, a high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Now, does this remind you of anybody? Bill coming out of Towns Hospital, and Bill thought that self-knowledge, would keep him sober. Yeah, for a short period of time. And then the obsession takes over our mind and tells us that, what? We're going to drink, what? And another time, fear sobered Bill up for a short period of time. But that it didn't keep him sober very long. Bill overheard, Dr. Silkworth telling Lois that, Bill's going to have to be locked up. That scared Bill. Fear sobered him up for a short period of time, but couldn't keep him sober. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. So he returned to this doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems. Yet, he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? Well, we know that when we try to control alcohol, we don't enjoy it. And when we're enjoying it, we have no control over it. And it's a tough, it's how often did we try to quit? I'm finished. I'm finished for good. Bill wrote in his Bible, family Bible, that he was through with liquor. Promised Lois that I'm through with it, but he couldn't do it. How many times did Dr. Bob try to give it up? And Dr. Bob is 17 years, what I call on the hamster wheel. Of taking sedatives in the morning, so he could go to work without his hands shaking. He was a proctologist. He's going to work on people's rear ends. Who wants a surgeon that has got shaky hands? Not me personally, but that's and then he would make enough money that he could buy alcohol on the way home. 17 years on what I call the hamster wheel. It's a tough life. What we go through. They talk about, Dr. Silkworth talked about we had to hit bottom. Deflation of ego, before we're willing to do something because we have no other option. We've tried all the other options and they just haven't worked. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. Hopeless. If you have some hope, but this is hopeless. No hope whatsoever. In the doctor's judgment, he was hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was a great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. Wow. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. I always put that together with the first step, where we realize that, you know what? We're beat. We are down for the count. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is exception. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. Okay? Phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacement and rearrangements." And this line I love. "Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them." You know what used to guide our life? Selfishness and self-seeking. That my middle name. Everything was for me. But here, when we have that vital spiritual experience, we start to, instead of thinking about what can I get from Bunny, I'm thinking, what can I do for Bunny today? Okay? Judy's had a rough day, so you know what? I'm going to give Judy a phone call and just see how she's doing. Maybe she needs to vent a little bit. Okay? Or Trey. Trey's going through something that nobody knows about. And I'm just making this up, so please don't. please don't text everybody and say, I heard Rob say that you weren't. I'm just throwing these out there as examples. you know, and, but the whole thing is that I have to have a whole psychic change. Instead of thinking about myself 24/7, I have to think about other people. Okay. I am going to think about myself. These things are going to crop up that I'm going to say, oh, I feel bad for myself. Ah, but then I realize I've got 12 steps that I've gone through. I know what to do with it. Because what did Bill do when he felt that, resentment and self pity coming on? He got up off his rear end and he went to go to town's hospital to help another alcoholic. And he found himself being lifted up, feeling better because he wasn't constantly thinking about himself. Gratitude. We talk about gratitude sometimes and how important it is, that we think about other people. And, it's a whole new way of living. You know, Ideas, emotions cast aside. I just love that idea. Just I'm not thinking about that anymore. But, you know, we got step 10, which I like to think of as the safety net, where when I do something wrong, I realize that I've done something that I shouldn't have. I said something that I thought was funny, but it hurt Emily's feelings. So I apologize to Emily. When? Now. I deal with it now so that it's gone. And if for some reason I'm laying in bed doing my step 11 and I think, you know what? I said something that might have upset Emily. First thing in the morning, I've got to go to Emily and straighten it out. Make sure that it doesn't become a resentment. It doesn't come to the point that I say, you know what? Well, Emily was mean to me. You know, I came into the room and she didn't say hello to me right away. She said hello to Scott, but she didn't say hello to me. I twist things around until I get a resentment and I'm making excuses for my bad behavior. No, I take responsibility for the way I am. But I love that. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, Dr. Young said, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Wow. Poor Roland, eh? Where does he get this? Where does he find, you know, this change? Well, spirituality, religion, join a group. So what did Roland do? Took him a little bit of time, but he joined the Oxford group. The reason he joined the Oxford group is because his daughter was a member of the Oxford group. So his daughter talked to him and he became a part of the Oxford group eventually. Yeah. And was able to, get together with Shep Cornell, and show up to court and help out little Ebby Thatcher. And the rest is history. Dr. Young to Roland, Roland to Ebby, Ebby to Bill, Bill to Dr. Bob, and this book to all of us. So it's an incredible 360. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for it reflected that, after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, it did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. He's already been going to church. Dr. Bob was going to the Oxford group for approximately 2 years and was still drinking every night. So just because you go someplace doesn't mean that you are taking anything in or changing. Okay. What it meant is Dr. Bob was trying to keep his wife happy by going to these meetings and getting nothing out of it. Why? Couldn't relate to anybody that was there. He thought a lot of T. Henry Williams and his wife Clarice and some of the people at the meetings, Henrietta Seiberling, you know, but it wasn't until he sat down with Dr. Bob, with Bill at Henrietta Seiberling Gatehouse that Bill was able to get through to Dr. Bob and to explain to him the vital piece that was missing, and explain alcoholism, and as Dr. Bob said, here is the first man that understood exactly what it's all about. And not from a book, not because somebody else had mentioned it, but he had lived it. Bill had lived the same type of life, and he would understand. So one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic can get through where other people can't, you know. So always remember that. All through the book, it talks about, step 12. Bill is always mentioning it throughout the book. When in doubt, talk to another alcoholic. Okay. When you're feeling down, go talk to another alcoholic. Okay. Go help somebody. Go be of service. What can I do? And always ask yourself, where do I fit in? Where are my responsibilities? We're always told we're supposed to sponsor people. Sometimes it's not that easy to get a sponsee, or the sponsee isn't doing what you think they should do. Okay, or you're failing with your sponsees, or you feel like you're failing with your sponsee. Remember, Bill's first 6 months, he didn't get anybody sober. He had failure after failure. He kept telling everybody about his white light experience and how, he had found God. Other people couldn't relate. Dr. Silkworth calmed him down. Said, Bill, stop hitting them with that spirituality. Deflate them, deflate their egos. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving, powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works. And it's a whole new life. Who would have thought that on a Wednesday night at 8:30 Eastern time that you'd be sitting in the Zoom room? Now, Charlotte, I know it's a heck of a lot later there. It's 1:30 there probably. But, who would have thought that here we'd be sitting in a Zoom room, listening to somebody from another country, speak, show some pictures, and try to, get a smile out of Kevin, my buddy from Australia, you know, but it's a design for living that works. It works in rough going. Not everything is going to work out in our lives. People are going to get sick. People are going to die, you know, and before we would go and we would drink. Oh, I won't think about this right now. That was the thing I liked about drinking. I didn't have to think. It stopped my brain from going around and, a million miles an hour, until I would just pass out. Now I can deal with things. I I have anxiety. So if there's a big crowd of where I'm going to go, I feel it in the pit of my stomach, this anxiety. Now I know what to do. God, I feel anxious. Please take this feeling away from me so that I can enjoy the situation, so that I can go with my wife, have a great time, and just enjoy it. God, I have fear. I don't know why I have fear, but please take this away so that I can enjoy myself, so that I can do the next right thing, so that I can be of service to other people. These are things that we have that we can use today. If there's a problem that, I pray to God, ask, what should I do on this situation? What should I do about this? What should I do about that? We have sponsors. We have friends in the fellowship. Okay. Now, I might be going through something that normally I would talk to Trey about, but he'll tell me that, I haven't been through that situation. But you know what? Charlie's been through that. Maybe we should give Charlie a call and ask him about it. so I can talk to Charlie. Now I'll have to wait a few minutes for him to get to the couch, but he'll get there and he'll be able to, but we have people we can deal with and that can help us, you know, but it all comes up to God, and don't forget that. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. Now, if you have ever read Varieties of Religious Experience, Emily, I think, is the only one I know that's gone through the whole book. It is not an easy read. Now, Bill Wilson has said that he's read the book. Now, he said he read this in the hospital when he was detoxing. I do not believe that Bill Wilson read the book. I believe he thumbed through the book and might have picked up on a couple of things, but I do not believe. Now, remember when you were detoxing or having 3 days of sobriety, were you in any position to take a difficult book to read and really understand it? I know Bill Wilson was a smart man, great in business, but I do not believe that he could have read that book in that time frame. So, but even Bill Wilson has said that he thumbed through it. I believe that. Thumbing is easy, reading is another. Hey, I'm going to put into the chat later on when I get a chance the Variety of Religious Experience so that you can download it if you are interested. If you get the chance, read lecture 9, because that talks about a spiritual experience, a white light type of experience. Most spiritual experiences are slow. They develop over a period of time. Most of the time, and they talk about it in the book, that you don't even realize that something has changed within you. Other people notice it before you do. Now, with me, I was in a fellowship for 3 months. I got laid off of work. Called into the office and sorry, Rob, we're have to let you go. We're laying you off. Now, normally that would have broken my spirit, and I would think, oh God, I can't do anything. Now I've lost my job, my whole identity, everything is shot. I walked out the door. I looked up. I said, God, I know you got something better for me. And you know what? He didn't let me down. He gave me the best job I could ever get. And the thing is that it gave me my self-confidence back. Because I was broken to a certain extent. But that's when I realized I found my spiritual experience. It wasn't, overnight. It was slow. But that's when I realized that I had it. And you know what? I hope everybody experiences. I'm sure a white light experience would be fantastic. But Bill had 3 of them. They wear off. Okay? We got to keep going. We got to keep doing things to strengthen our spiritual experience. I always talk about God, this finger, me, my finger, my connection to my higher power. Now, if I start doing the things that I'm supposed to do, stop going to meetings, I stop sponsoring people, I stop going to, help out at Zoom meetings, and I start thinking about myself, how far does my spiritual connection have to be till the obsession of the mind comes back and it tells me that, Rob, you're not an alcoholic. You haven't had a drink in so long. You know what? You're fooling yourself. You're not an alcoholic. How far? I don't want to find out. I want to be like that. I want to keep a tight spiritual connection. And by doing that, by studying the big book, okay, sharing with other people, keeps me spiritually fit, helping other people. Instead of thinking about myself, thinking about other people. And that's so, so important. But William James was quite the character. He gave a series of lectures, and that's what they put into this book. And he gave lectures, and it was all about religious experiences. How people found God. And we have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms. As soon as we are willing and honest enough to try, those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. One of the reasons the Cleveland group splintered off from the Oxford group, or the people from Akron, was because the Catholics were going to be excommunicated from the church. Okay? Because the Catholic Church didn't want the Oxford principles to be brought over to their Catholic people. So Clarence Snyder said, you know what? We're going to start our own meeting, and we're going to call it Alcoholics Anonymous. So that's why the first group to be called Alcoholics Anonymous was the Cleveland group, and they had splintered away from the Oxford group. Why? Because spirituality is different from religion. Religion has dogma. Spirituality is what you make it. Jim Burwell and his line of come up with your own conception of God. What is God to you? My conception might be different than Bunny's. Okay, Scott, I'm sure, has got a different conception than I do. Kevin, who knows? We can all have our all different conception, and it's none of my business what his conception is. Okay, I just have to know that he's found his higher power, and he is living a better life than he's ever lived it before. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such conviction no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we've recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. Each individual in a personal story describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what had actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problem that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. So I wanted to show a few pictures of Roland and go over a couple of things. So bear with me 1 second while we get the screen share set up.